So once again, welcome to looking ahead to high school. It really is like preschool all over again. I like to, it's been so interesting to think about the evolution of the high school process over the last several years. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to play this role of sort of part-time guidance counselor and taking taking time to really learn as much as I can about all of the various high schools in the area, as well as support our families in thinking through that process. And so first and foremost, I want you to know that I'm a resource for you as you begin to think about high schools. And I'm happy to answer questions, but then also even more happy to set up times when we could talk together about what might make sense for you, your family, and your student. And I won't necessarily be making recommendations about specific schools, but I do hope that I could help you walk through that process and think about what might make sense as far as the options that are out there. And the nice part is that the landscape is fairly wide open. Most of the schools either have a lottery type system or are schools of choice. And we'll talk more specifically about that as we dive in. So let's get started. So it's important to think about where you're coming from, and I'm so glad to see that we have a number of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade families here with us. And so depending upon where you are right now, you'll want to be thinking about various things. If you currently have a 6th grade child, you might want to start thinking about what your options are. Think more and start to learn more about your child, and definitely listen to other people who have gone through that experience. And again, I'll be talking more at the end of this about different networks that you can utilize to learn more about the people that that you might be able to. Oh, thank you for that reminder, Dana. You are correct. I will mute everybody for now, and then we'll go from there. So if your child's in 7th grade, it is an opportunity. And let me, I should have probably also prefaced this by talking about how this presentation is going to be a mix between what you would do in a normal year, but then also we'll talk specifically about what you might be able to do this year, because certainly things are going to look a little different this year due to COVID, and by little I mean a lot, than they have in the past. Sort of many of the main parts of this process will be the same, but definitely there'll be some tweaks that we'll be working on. So we'll be working on that and talking about that as we move through it. The other thing is, if you're in the 7th grade right now, is to be thinking about talking to alumni families. And again, as I mentioned, I'll be sharing some information with you about how to connect with them. And then also be starting to think about prioritizing your schools. Again, there are so many different options out there, and it's important to start to think about narrowing it down to those schools that make sense for you. And we'll talk about how you might be able to do that. And then finally, it's go time. There's going to be a timeline that I will share with you following this presentation that outlines, as best as NAIS has done in the past, there's a National Association of Independent Schools, outlines the different steps that you might want to take in that final year of middle school in preparation for that step. And really, I call that go time, because it is time to start to begin to make those decisions. And learn as much as you can about the school and get as many different experiences as you can. And again, that's going to be a little bit different and more difficult this year. And it's going to be really important that you try to leverage those networks that you have to families that have kids in those schools. Certainly, we hope that things will return to some semblance of normal next year. But also, you might want to hear about the remote learning opportunities in those schools right now. Again, not to say that we're going to be in a remote learning situation next year. But again, I think it speaks to the schools about how they've organized and conducted themselves in this remote learning period. So as we begin the process, I'd like to encourage you to think about 6 different areas. First of all, and first and foremost, is to think about your child. What are the things that they love to do? What are the programs that they are really interested in? What makes them tick? And what are they interested in? Again, they may not necessarily know all of that right now, but some questions to think about might be like, what are the things about Emerson that you really love? And what are some of the things that you would hope your high school experience might have that are similar to what you have right now? And also, what things would you like to be different? I think that's also important to know. Sometimes we have kids that are looking for something that's a little bit bigger, and that's when you start to look at the school type. Are you interested in having a experience with a more diverse and a larger student body? And if that's the case, you might be looking at a different type of school than something that's a little bit smaller. Curriculum certainly comes into play, and we'll be talking in more detail about some of the different curricular elements that come up at various high schools, such as the advanced placement classes that you could take, or the IB program, or different magnet programs, or things like that at various schools. And then, as I mentioned before, it's really important to leverage those networks that you have, make contacts with people at the school. Many of the schools right now, even though they aren't able to offer in-person tours and visits, have made their counselors available to you to answer any and all questions that you have about that experience and the high school experience at those schools. And then also, as I mentioned, alumni are just our Emerson network is so incredible. And I'll be sharing with you lists of names of families that have offered up their contact information for you to connect with them to hear about their high school experience for their child. And again, finally, in the packet that I'll share with you, there are still a number of opportunities for you to connect with those schools. In fact, one that I wanted to mention to everybody off the bat is that next Wednesday, November 18th, Green Hills is offering an Emerson parent-only virtual information session at 7 p.m. on Zoom. So next week, if you're interested, they will be offering that, and we'll be sharing more information about that in the coming days with you. But I wanted to make sure that you knew about that. So if Green Hills is a school that you're interested in learning more about, they've offered up their time next week for you to learn more. All right. So now starting to think about what are the specific things are you looking for? And first and foremost, the size of the school, the distance that it is from your school and sort of the community. And a lot of those have to do with sort of the quality of life factor, but also have to do with the things that your child and or you might be looking for. There's a significant difference between a school like Pioneer that's currently has an enrollment of around 2,400 to a school like Y-High that is closer to the 500 range. And so again, there's a big difference, but with that difference in size can come some differences in opportunities and experiences and extracurricular activities. And so again, it's important to be thinking through what those different opportunities are at the school, depending upon the size. Athletics might be something that you're concerned about or thinking about. And again, that can be impacted by the size of the school. And again, those are things that I can try to help work through with you if you're curious about what different schools offer. Distance is specifically related to transportation. Obviously, there are a number of schools that if you were to school of choice into them, they would not provide transportation for you. And there are other schools in which the transportation might be a lot of time on a bus, for example, or in the car. And you want to just think through all of those logistics as you do right now and as you are right now as well. But again, thinking about that as it relates to your high school experience is important. Now, maybe at some point your child will be driving themselves. But again, that's a little bit of a ways off, and thinking through the challenges that trying to get them to and from school might present before that time is something to definitely think about. And then also just thinking about the community of that school and the makeup of the community, who's a part of it, and what sort of community you're looking for. So all of those can really go into that. And again, those can also be questions that you're talking about with your child. And they will hopefully be able to give you some insights into what they are looking for as far as their high school experience. The next question and things to look at are, what are the options? And this is where we get into talking a little bit more specifically about curricular options, extracurricular options as well, and some of the programs that you might want to take advantage of depending upon the school that you end up at or the schools that you're looking at. So I'm going to talk more in depth about the advanced placement in the International Baccalaureate, the AP and the IB, as well as the magnets at other schools in a little bit. But I also wanted to just make sure to touch on the fact that you'll also want to consider, if athletics is an option, again, some of the big challenges or things to think about are if you're at a very large school, then the pool of potential people that you're playing with is much larger. And so again, the competition tends to be a little bit more intense. If that's something you're looking for, then certainly the larger public high schools would offer that. And the same goes for all of the other extracurriculars that are out there: band, orchestra, theater. The larger the school, the higher the competition. And so if it's something that you might want to look at a smaller school that has less competition for those available spaces, again, those are just things that you would want to try to balance as you're thinking about those programs. The other thing I would mention too is to think about world language. If world language is something that it's really important to you and you're wanting to look for specific languages, that might have an impact on the school that you look at. There may be schools that don't offer every language or the languages that you're looking for. And again, we can walk through different schools and what they offer a little bit later or in a separate conversation. But again, those are things to definitely be looking for. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about the AP and the IB. These sort of acronyms get thrown around a lot. And over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, the International Baccalaureate program has gained a lot more steam and sort of not leverage, but at least a stronger place and certainly in the Ann Arbor or the Washtenaw County community as a pedagogical approach to high school education. It actually has a lower school and a middle school component to it, but I'm talking specifically about the diploma program, which relates to the work that kids would be doing in their junior and senior year of high school. But there are specific schools that only offer the IB program, and there are other schools that only offer the advanced placement program classes as well. So some of the big differences are that the advanced placement classes are much more focused on content and sort of taking in as much content as possible and then showing that you understand and know that content on tests at the end of the year. These are all, for the most part, multiple choice tests, with the exception of English and some of the ones that are writing based. The interesting part about AP tests is that you can take the test without enrolling in the course. So you can pay the money, you can show up at the testing site, and you can take the test having never sat in an AP class before. And if you do extremely well and you score, they are scored out of a range of 1 to 5. If you score typically a 4 or a 5 on that test, that can often correlate to college credit depending upon the college or university that you go to. And that's one of the benefits of AP tests in some people's mind, is that you can gain college credit in preparation to actually going to college and start out sort of ahead of the game in that respect. Typically, these advanced placement classes are just single level courses. There's just only one option of them. And there is no specific diploma that is attached to the advanced placement. So they are simply singular tests and courses that you can take throughout your high school experience. And typically they start in junior and senior year. That's typically when they start. But again, you could take them at any point. So if you feel like you're prepared for them as a sophomore or a freshman, you can always take the test. No guarantees that they would necessarily fit into your freshman or sophomore year schedule, but they are available there for you. Now, as far as the International Baccalaureate is concerned, in my opinion, it's a much more comprehensive program. It typically involves, it does involve 3 main areas, which include a theory of knowledge, which is a large sort of research presentation that a student would put together and share in the culmination of their experience. It also includes preparing for and writing the extended essay, which is a sort of cumulative or summative assessment of their time in school. And they get support in the writing process along the way. But that is a very in-depth researched essay that students would write. And then finally, there's the Community Action and Service program, which is a community service-oriented project that students immerse themselves in and work to accrue hours of community service. And all 3 of those play into a student earning their IB diploma. Now, in addition to that, they can take IB classes in junior and senior year that also offer the opportunity to take tests at the end that then would get them potential college credit. And those classes typically are offered at two different levels. There's a standard level and a higher level course, and students can choose which ones they take during their high school experience. And so again, it is a little bit, certainly more of a comprehensive program than just singular advanced placement courses. And again, there are a number of schools that offer specifically the IB diploma. Those include Y-High and Huron High School is currently the Ann Arbor's IB school. And Dexter actually also has an IB academy that students can enroll in. And so those are the schools that are currently offering the IB. Now, when we start talking about specific school types, it gets a little bit tricky, and it's important that that we walk through the ways in which you sort of maneuver between public schools in Ann Arbor. And so certainly the large public high schools in Ann Arbor, Pioneer, Huron, Skyline. We also have community high school, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail. And then we also have a public school charter options, which include Y-High, WTMC, which is that Washtenaw Technical Middle College, and then the Early College Alliance, which is run out of Eastern Michigan. And so again, I'll focus primarily at first on those larger public high schools, because depending upon where you are districted for, and depending upon where you live, your address is districted for a specific high school. If you were to, for example, want to change, if you were districted for Pioneer, for example, and you wanted to transfer to Skyline, that is considered an in-district transfer. You are a Ann Arbor Public School student, but you are choosing to transfer to a school that is not the one that you are districted for. And so that's considered an in-district transfer. In my time doing this, every child who has requested an in-district transfer, that's been granted. So if you are considering that, your odds of that being accepted are very high. In fact, again, I've never had a situation where a child hasn't been able to transfer through an in-district transfer. Now, the second option is what's called school of choice. And that's a situation where you might be a Saline area schools resident and you are districted for Saline area schools, but you want to go to Pioneer. You would apply to schools of choice into Ann Arbor Public Schools and then go to Pioneer. Now, the challenge with that is the enrollment process in Ann Arbor Public Schools begins with the registration of all their current students. Then, depending upon how many spaces they have available after that, they will look at all of their in-district transfers. And then following on that, they will offer up any available spaces to schools of choice students. And the way that they determine who's available for schools of choice is they will open an enrollment window, which typically the first one happens in middle of January. And they will say the enrollment window is now open. If you want to apply for schools of choice, you can now apply, and they will begin to count those enrollments as they come in. If they are getting to a certain point where they're feeling like they're going to be full, they're going to close that window, and they might not allow any more schools of choice into either a specific school or schools in general. Now, this has only happened in my time doing this at Pioneer. There was, I think it was last year or the year before, and maybe even both. They had an enrollment window that opened for schools of choice. They ended up closing it early because they had so many applicants to Pioneer that they didn't want to, again, if you get in the window, you're going to be in. It's not like you wait to see. So they needed to shut the window down because it got it was getting too many, they were getting too many applicants to Pioneer. They opened it back up later for Huron and Skyline, but they didn't offer any more schools of choice opportunities into Pioneer. So if that is something that you are considering as far as doing a school of choice, and remember, this is important because if you are not districted in Ann Arbor Public Schools, you have to schools of choice in order to go to one of those schools. If you are already in the district and you're already in Ann Arbor Public Schools family, then you can simply transfer in district to that school. And so just be aware of that and make sure you know sort of where you stand in that spot, in that space. So again, that's definitely something to consider. The other, I already went through this, and sorry, I forgot I had a slide for that, but we've talked through it. I'm going to give you all these slides anyway, so don't worry about if we didn't get through it all. At least as it wasn't on the screen. So let's talk a little bit specifically about those lotteries that happen at other schools. So one of them is at community high school. So this has always historically been handled on a lottery basis. It is not first come, first serve. It is purely random. There are 132 spots available for their freshman class every year. They typically get around 400 applicants for those 130 spots. And what they do is once you submit your application, and in order to submit your application, you must attend at least one open house. Now, they haven't published exactly what they're doing yet. And I've been reaching out to try to find out what their plan is, and they haven't shared that with me yet. But you typically have to attend an open house. I would imagine that they'll probably do those virtual this year. And they will take attendance, and they will, confirm that you are in fact there and you did in fact attend. You submit an application, and then at a certain point I believe it's in February, they announce they will give you a number. And so you will receive a number or actually, no, sorry, it's not February. It's typically later on, April or May. February is when the deadline closes. So in April or May, they'll announce the numbers. And typically if you are number 1 through 32, again, randomly chosen, you would be offered a spot at community. If you don't, you would be on the waiting list. And oftentimes we've had situations where they've gone down almost into the 200s to offer people spots at community because those families or those applicants that got higher numbers ended up choosing a different option for their child. So you can apply for the lottery and you can still choose to not go there at the end of the day, even if you're just wanting to see if you're going to have a spot there. So that's community high school, and certainly be keeping an eye out for those open house and virtual open house dates as they come up, or once I learn about what they're going to be doing this year, I'll certainly be letting you know. The other option or the other school that does a lottery is Y-High, or Washtenaw International High School. And the way that this works is that students can apply, and I will be sharing with you all of the application steps that they've shared so far. They have their admissions steps on their website right now for thinking through that for next year. And so you can apply for the lottery through your home district. And so again, it's a little tricky to follow because it's really about how the money that's allocated to individual students follows that child to the school. And so they want to make sure that if you are going through your school, your neighborhood district, there are some advantages that gives you. For example, if you go to Y-High through your own neighborhood school, you can do all extracurriculars through your neighborhood school. So if you are districted for Pioneer and you get in the lottery and you get a spot at Y-High through that Ann Arbor district, you could go and do extracurricular sports and other activities at Pioneer. Now, transportation is on you, but you would have that opportunity to do that. If you don't get in through your neighborhood school, the school that you're districted for, you would be placed in the schools of choice lottery, and you would have the opportunity to then get a spot in at Y-High through IPSI schools. They've now switched it where that if you when you apply and if you get in through the secondary lottery system, you would be schools of choice into IPSI schools, and I believe you would then be participating in your extracurriculars through that district. And so again, it's a little bit confusing depending upon if you don't get in during that first lottery cycle in your home district, and that might be a deal breaker for you if you're considering Y-High as an option for you. The interesting thing about Y-High is that they do give priority to siblings. So if you have an older sibling that's currently at Y-High, you automatically get it. And so again, that's definitely an advantage to those that have siblings that are already there. There's no lottery for you. Now, let's talk a little bit about other private school options. So certainly there are some fantastic private schools in the area, and they also come with a certain series of admissions guidelines and practices. So we'll talk about that next. So for all the private schools, they will be asking you to fill out letters of recommendation. And typically those are done through the admissions portal or through an admissions application that you would submit online. And usually, at least for Green Hills and Cranbrook and other private schools in the area, you would simply be putting in the name of the teacher or administrator that you would like a letter of recommendation from. Typically, they will ask for a letter of recommendation from a math teacher, a language arts teacher, and they may ask for an additional person, and you are certainly always welcome to reach out to individuals if you want anything beyond that. Those teachers would get a sort of a automatically generated email asking them to complete an application form, and that would be submitted online to your admissions profile for review by their admissions committee. If for some reason it needs to be done on hand or as a printed document, we would ask that you would provide the person that you are going to be asking the letter for a an envelope and have it be addressed and all that. The other request that we have is if you are going to be requesting a letter of recommendation or you're going to be submitting somebody's name as a recommendor for that school or for your profile, please give them some advance notice. It always goes a long way to send a personal note to teachers if you're asking them to complete a recommendation. We can certainly get those automatically generated emails, but it's so much nicer to get a personal note from friends and families that you're requesting a letter of recommendation. So that's certainly helpful. The other thing to think about is academic testing. So many private schools do require something like the PSAT for admissions. Green Hills, for example, you can submit the SST or the PSAT for admissions. It is not required, but you certainly can. If you're planning to do that, again, I think that you'll need to really be doing a little bit of digging on what testing is available. Again, I think that we're going to be fairly limited in the ability to do any sort of standardized testing prior to that. But I know that, for example, Y-High, and this is back to the public schools, Y-High also does some placement testing beforehand, and public schools will do that as well. And it'll just be important to think through how they go about doing that, how they're going about doing that. I know that Y-High, for example, is planning to try to do all of their placement testing in person. And so they will be limiting the number of people that come in on any one time to take those tests, and they'll be maintaining, safe distances and all that. But again, that would be a requirement for them. And so I would check with individual schools to learn more about what their academic testing requirements are going to be. Some of them will be requirements, and others of them will be more for placement. And so those placement tests would be more so what you would find at the public schools. And they are just going to be working to make sure that they place you and register you in those classes that make sense based on what you're looking for. I will say that if there's ever a challenge between the recommendation that the school is giving for your child and what you are hoping them to be, what classes you're hoping them to be in, we can help advocate for you. We've had situations where kids have maybe not tested all that well, and there could be a variety of reasons for that. But we believe that they would be well suited in an honors class, for example, and we can certainly advocate with those schools to try to help them better understand the child and what we believe to be in their best interest. Finally, for many of the schools, you are going to be asked to submit transcripts. and Beth Miskevich in the office is going to be the person that's going to do that for you. Again, a personal note to her requesting that transcript being sent to the school is very helpful and thoughtful. And it would be important, again, to include any documentation along with that to her so that she can process that as easily as possible. It helps also to provide, the dates that you need it by and those sorts of things. She's been doing this for a long time and is extremely great at it. And so I have certainly no concerns about it. But again, a personal note to her requesting that would really go a long way. So certainly thank you in advance for doing that. I'm just keeping an eye on our time here. Oh, we're doing good. So placement tests and testing out, we sort of alluded to that a little bit. This is specific to those world language classes, math classes, science, English, typically those classes that might be more accelerated at Emerson, such that when students are leaving after 8th grade, they are prepared to move into classes that might be outside of the bubble of the current or traditional 9th grade program. And again, that's where placement testing and things like that are going to be helpful. So again, most schools will provide some options for you to test out. Again, I don't know specifically what those are going to look like. They also might look like a recommendation form from the current 8th grade team or a teacher on that team to recommend a certain math class or world language class or things like that. One of the things I will say, if you go back to thinking about the size of the school, there's always been a very clear ratio between the size of the school and how much work it takes for the parents. So the larger the school, the more work it's going to take for you as a family, or as in the work of the parents, to sort of get what you want or get what you need from that school. And I think it's going to be even more difficult now, given the extra demands that folks in the public schools are facing right now due to COVID. But again, the advocacy and the work that you would need to do to sort of make sure that things are in the right spots for your child as they move from 8th grade to 9th grade, the work will be much greater. In the larger the school, the more work that you'll have to do, and the more advocacy that you might have to do. At the same time, I've heard a number of very positive experiences from families that have matriculated up to large public high schools and really connected with the counselors, and the counselors have been phenomenal. But I'm just encouraging you to just be thoughtful about getting that contact and those relationships going as soon as possible, and as soon as you make that decision about what school you're going to go to, and just making sure that those things get in line. And that could be making sure that our current 8th grade teachers are recommending classes that are appropriate for your child. It can also be that we can work to advocate for them to get into classes that make sense for them. But again, it's just going to be important to get those relationships going. And then again, some of the things that you can expect. So typically in math, students would matriculate into the next appropriate math course that's offered in high school. Students that are in algebra would typically matriculate and move to geometry. Those that are in geometry right now would typically go to algebra 2. There might be some variations of that and different names of that. For example, I know at Y-High they have integrated math, which is different, and it's a little bit, certainly as the name indicates, a little more integrated approach to math than a standalone geometry class or algebra class. But again, just be aware that our curriculum flows very nicely into those high school programs, and we intentionally set it up that way. In addition, as you look at world languages, most of our students will place into the 2nd or 3rd year of their world language at high school. And again, oftentimes a placement test is needed, but occasionally students can use the tests that they take in 8th grade and use those as indicators to high schools that they are prepared for that level. It sort of depends on the language, but that's an opportunity for them. And then certainly also the world language teachers can advocate and make recommendations about what language those kids should go to when they go off to high school. And then for science and English, typically in most of the schools, there are traditional and then honors level classes. And that's often where a placement test will come in for the school to help determine what makes the most sense. If there's an area that we've struggled with the most, it typically is in that science and English domain, as far as students that are interested in taking an honors level class, but may not test may have not tested in a way that indicates that to the people that are making the decision, and we can advocate for you and for your child if that is something that you are interested in. This was something that certainly I would encourage as much as possible, although in this year it's not going to be as possible to do that. But again, this speaks more to the trying to get as much experience as you can with a particular school, but obviously doing so safely. Many of the schools have online, images that are out there, videos, things like that, and just trying to digest as much information as possible to learn about the school as you can, and taking advantage of any opportunities that they have to share various aspects of their school with you. And again, that's where the networking comes in, and connecting with alumni and hearing those stories from other families is going to be so important, especially this year. I mean, again, who knows what the spring will look like, and hopefully there are going to be opportunities for them to go visit those schools. But for our 8th graders, in the spring, that's going to be coming down to the time that they're going to be, y'all are going to be needing to make decisions, and there may not be as many opportunities to get those visits in prior to having to make that decision. And so I just would want to be thoughtful about trying to find ways that you can get any insight into the school experience, the lived school experience, as possible. And again, we can help you with that, and certainly our network of alumni and parents and families can help you with that too. So we would definitely want to try to make sure that happens. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about fit, and it's all about trying to find the best fit for your child. Our students, the feedback that we get from our students, they're exceptionally well prepared to take on high school wherever they go. And really, we want to help try to find the best fit for each and every child as they move off to high school. And you may already know what the best, what the high school option is going to be. There may only be one, but there may be a couple, and you may be thinking about other opportunities. And again, I want to try to be a resource for you to think through those options and what's out there. And if you need help and some ideas on what might make sense, again, I'm happy to help. So that's sort of, at the end of the day, what I want to offer is setting up an individual one-on-one family time with me to just talk through those opportunities that are out there, and then walk through what sorts of things you're thinking about as you're making those decisions. And so that's just a simple email to me, and we can set up a time. Obviously, it'd probably be over Zoom, unless you want to go sit outside a tent at Emerson. But we could certainly try to find a way to connect and talk through those options. And again, I can't speak more highly about the network of Emerson alumni that I'll share with you, and connecting with them to learn more about those experiences as well. So that is the quick version of the presentation. I do see that we have a number of questions that are in here, and I do want to just answer those. So when do you request it? So a question about requesting in-district transfers. So typically those in-district transfers happen within that same enrollment window for schools of choice. Now, I know that typically they will process those in-district transfers first before they start opening and looking at those schools of choice. But I believe that the window is the same. If that's different, I will definitely let you know. But to the best of my recollection, the January window, the first window that typically opens around the middle of January, is when you would be applying for those in-district transfers. School of choice into Ann Arbor school. Can you specify which of the high schools you prefer? Yes. So when you do a schools of choice request, you will be you will say specifically what school you are interested in going to. It's not just, hey, I want a schools of choice into Ann Arbor Public Schools, and you pick the school for me. It would be you would pick the specific schools. Let's see. Lottery. Can someone confirm that you have to be Ann Arbor School District to apply to Community High School Lottery, and can't schools of choice lottery in from another district? Yes. Oh, sorry, that question got answered. Sorry, I'm not reading far enough down. So Community High School is only open to Ann Arbor School residents. So Ann Arbor Public School residents. So you must be a resident of Ann Arbor Public Schools in order to apply for community. And yeah, so that is a challenge. The other sort of restrictions that I do want to mention is that Y-High historically hasn't had any chance for residents of districts that have other IB programs. They do all of their lottery by zip code, and that's intentional to really build the diversity of their student body. So they only allow districts for they only allow applications from districts that don't have IB schools. And so I believe they're not allowing Dexter residents to apply to Y-High at the moment. So so there's a question, is there an existing list of all these choices somewhere? Yes. So I'm going to be sharing with you, it's not a spreadsheet, but it's a document that has many of the local options for high schools that are out there. That includes size and curriculum and district, extracurriculars to a certain extent, and then also links and resources for you for those specific schools. I did not include cost. That's something typically that you'd be able to find on the websites of those independent or private schools. Can you tell me more about major differences between the 3 large public high schools? Yeah, so differences between the 3 large public high schools. So that's always a great question. And those 3 schools, so we're talking Pioneer, Skyline, and Huron. Those schools have really differentiated themselves in some specific ways. And so that's a great question to dive into. So first of all, Pioneer. Pioneer is the largest of the 3. It's definitely got the largest enrollment right now. I'm an Ann Arbor Pioneer student, so I graduated from there back when it was about a fairly similar size, but this was before Skyline existed. And I can remember trying to walk down through C Hall, and literally you knew there were times you couldn't walk through, not because you were going to get shoved into a locker, but because there was literally no space. The hallways were jam packed, and obviously pre-COVID times, but it was quite a crowded school. I don't think it's quite that crowded right now, but it is the largest of the 3. It is also the most traditional of the 3 schools. So it has AP classes. It's a traditionally AP, advanced placement classes, that are offered there at the school. And it's got robust extracurriculars, athletics. The band is a Grammy award-winning band program that they have there. Their theater is exceptional. I mean, they have a lot of really strong programs there. And that's not to take anything away from Huron or Skyline, but Pioneer has differentiated itself in that way, and as also I think many families have sought that traditional public high school experience because that might most closely align with the experience that they had. And so that's Pioneer. Huron has now differentiated itself as the IB school in Ann Arbor, and so they offer now, beginning in 9th grade, the International Baccalaureate program. In 9th and 10th grade, it's more similar to the middle years program, which is a 6 through 10 IB-based program. And then in 11th and 12th grade, you can enroll in the diploma program, which we talked about earlier. So, but Huron also has very robust athletics and band and orchestra and those sorts of things that are involved in those schools. But I would say that it's a little bit smaller, and but it's definitely differentiating itself towards that IB program. And then Skyline is sort of in the middle. So Skyline still has many elements of the traditional public high school. They've got very strong athletics. They've got also all the other programs that we've talked about, band, orchestra, theater. The newest of the 3 schools, so the facilities are really impeccable. They also offer something called the magnet program, and so they have a process that you apply to be a part of different magnet programs, which essentially are almost like declaring a major to a certain extent. You can enroll in, for example, the health sciences magnet, in which your classes are designed around that theme. and work towards helping you learn more about that field as a potential career path. They also offer a business and communications magnet. I believe there's an engineering magnet, health sciences, and then maybe there's a media and communication. But those are optional magnet opportunities. A child can very easily go through Skyline and not take any magnets and take AP classes and go through that traditional high school experience similar to Pioneer. So that's the big differentiating factor for there. Oh, I'll say the other factor at Skyline is that it's based on a trimester schedule. And so that can throw people off a little bit, because the bit like Emerson's on a trimester schedule, but you take your classes all 3 trimesters regardless. It just happens that we break our marking periods into trimester chunks. For Skyline, it's a little bit different, because there may be times when you are you might not have a math class during a trimester and on one trimester, because it may not be offered, or the next math class that you're taking again may not be offered that trimester. So you might have 2 trimesters of math and then a trimester off. And so that can just be a little bit different than you might find at a school that's operating on quarters and semesters. And so that can sometimes feel a little bit off for folks. Some have felt too that the trimesters might be trying to condense the material into those two trimesters, which can feedback I've gotten is some people feel like it's rushed. But again, I think that kids get used to it, and they've done extremely well there as well. So that's another differentiator. A couple questions about how that changes with Dexter. Dexter is also, I would definitely say more in line with that larger public high school, but it's definitely smaller. So Dexter's looking at around somewhere between the 800 to 1,000 kids in their school, and is certainly smaller than you would find at any of the larger public high schools in Ann Arbor. They offer AP classes. They offer all of the athletics and band and theater and those types of experiences. The interesting part about Dexter is that they also do have an IB Academy that you can apply to and be a part of. Dexter residents, so those that are districted for Dexter, are the only ones that are able to dual enroll with the IB Academy and the classes that are offered through the traditional high school. If you were to schools of choice into Dexter, for example, you can only choose one or the other. You can't dual enroll. So you could schools of choice into the IB Academy and take all your classes in there, or you could schools of choice into the traditional high school and take all of your classes in there. So those are options for Dexter. But again, it is also what I would consider to be the traditional high school experience. And again, our kids have done exceptionally well there and have really enjoyed their experiences there as well. I'm seeing, can you still shadow at a high school this year? Again, not yet, not right now. Obviously, the vast majority of high schools are currently remote, so there's no shadowing opportunities. But again, the more we learn about that, the better. I'm seeing a question, anyone out there with an ADHD child? Our greatest goal is for our child to have a good high school experience. That is a great question as well. And let me just talk about the transition from Emerson to public high schools for children that might have a learning plan at Emerson or might need those specific accommodations in high school. If you're moving to a public high school, typically the process would include, I'm just seeing that a chat that Skyline is now in the semester system. Oh, during the pandemic. Oh, good to know. Okay, thank you. Thanks for letting us know. So typically when a child would move from Emerson into a local public high school at 9th grade, and they were to come with any sort of learning diagnosis, the school would initially, in a normal situation, a school would start them off on a general education plan, which gives the school 4 to 6 weeks to observe and work with that child to determine what's best for them. And then after that time, they may decide to go to a 504 plan or an IEP or nothing after that 4 to 6 weeks. The challenge that we've experienced, and that we certainly will support you and advocate for you, is that that 4 to 6 weeks is some of the most important time that you can have at a school, especially when you're transitioning to a new school. And I really feel like it's essential to having that first impression in those first few weeks be as positive as possible, setting up the rest of your high school experience to be positive and successful. And so typically what we will do is we will work directly with the counselors at the school and make sure that they have all of the information that we have, and we will pass that on to them with your permission as far as the accommodations that have worked well for specific kids, any other specific accommodations that we've used at school, and any documentation that we have, we will pass that on to them with the expectation that they have those accommodations in place from the very beginning of the school year, so that there isn't any gap between when they are put in place and when they start school. So our goal is for them to be supported from the very beginning. And this happens at public high schools, this happens at private high schools. We will do that for any child when they transition to high school. And so that's the process that we go through. And then I think it would probably, again, for specific questions about specific schools and their special education programs and the ways in which they support children at their schools, I probably could dive a little bit deeper in a more one-on-one conversation about individual schools, and would welcome that chance. I will say that the schools have certainly continued to improve the work that they do with kids in school in that way. And we have fostered much stronger relationships with those people who network with us prior to kids moving into those high schools. And oftentimes that will include a conversation between us at Emerson, parents, and those people that we're handing off to in high school. And certainly we can facilitate that as much as possible in preparation for that. Any insights on Steiner? Rudolph Steiner High School, they actually, I believe, have an information session tomorrow night at 5 p.m. And it's on Zoom. And so the information that I will be sharing with you either tonight or tomorrow morning will have that Zoom link and information for you to learn more about Steiner. So again, they are the Steiner School in the area. They've been doing a really remarkable job and have been open during this time and doing the vast majority of their outdoor learning while we are remote. But they are also sort of a more non-traditional program. They have a lot of opportunities for kids to do things that are geared more towards their passions. And they definitely will have a program that I would say blends a little bit more towards some of the elements of Emerson, but may not be as rigorous academically. And again, many students may be looking for that, and they will definitely be sharing more information tomorrow if you are interested. I'm just trying to keep up with chat here. Is it possible to do part-time at the high schools? If so, what's the protocol? So there is something that you can do that's called dual enrolling, and that depends. Sort of is the most of the time that I've seen that happen is students will dual enroll at community high school and then at one of the larger public high schools, and that's partly because community high school may not necessarily offer all of the classes on their campuses that a student might want to take. And so depending upon the school that you are districted for, you would be able to dual enroll at community and at those high schools, if that's what you mean by part-time. I'm not entirely sure if you're talking about dual enrolling or if you're talking about perhaps even taking college courses. In that case, there are opportunities through community high school to do something called community resource credit. And a student can apply for a community resource credit by taking a class with a university or maybe even a business owner or somebody else. They basically put a proposal together about saying like, during this trimester, here's what I'm going to be doing. And they would get, again, if it's approved, they would get that community resource credit in high school. Let's see. Would it be possible to schedule alumni students from the various high schools to speak with our current 8th grade? Yes, and definitely we are planning on doing that. And in fact, this year, that one of the silver linings of COVID is that this is so easy to connect people with one another right now through the computer screen. So we are definitely going to be pursuing networking with various alumni students, not necessarily just public schools, but I know, and there's a number of folks from other schools such as WTMC and Y-High and whatnot, who I would love to have come in. And then also we're hoping to perhaps not just have that opportunity, but also schedule some of the times when we have individual schools come and present to students. And that's something that we've typically done in the winter of each year. And so we would set up a time where kids would meet, and we would be doing this over Zoom, where they would come and have a chance to hear from the various school representatives. And those schools will oftentimes bring students with them to share that student experience with our 8th graders. And we'll definitely be facilitating that and making that happen as we get closer to the year. So definitely keep an eye out for that. More so have your students keep an eye out for that, because we'll be making that happen. Can't exactly tell you what time of day it's going to happen, but we'll work it in there somehow. Provide more explanation about WTMC. Sure. So Washtenaw Technical Middle College is a new-ish program. It's run through the Washtenaw Community College on campus there. It is typically, so right now it's a much more specifically designed 9th and 10th grade, more of a traditional 9th and 10th grade program, but with opportunities after that point to then declare and focus primarily on a particular area of study and take courses through the community college. And so by the end of your 4 years at WTMC, you actually have the opportunity to leave with a high school diploma and an associate's degree from the community college. And it's, all free because it's a charter school. They've done a really remarkable job of building up their 9th and 10th grade programs that have students assigned to faculty advisors and are part of a smaller cohort of kids as almost like an advisory that they work with, and the faculty advisors support them in their goals and their journey throughout. They have begun to build in other sort of extracurricular opportunities. Now, don't get me wrong, it is not the traditional high school experience, but they're definitely doing as well as they can to build that program into something that's going to be a little bit more robust. Excuse me, I'm just going to close this door for a second. All right, we're back. And so again, WTMC is a really interesting opportunity. Now, because of the attractiveness of the program, it has gotten a lot more popularity. And so it is currently now looking at more of a lottery-based system. And so it's definitely something to get on and think about and investigate, and then get more information about what their deadlines are going to be for their applications for the lottery. But any students can apply to it, as far as I know. And again, it would be something that is a non-traditional experience. But if your child is fairly confident in understanding how they learn, and they're independent, and they are sort of have that mindset of, I know what I want to do, it can be a really powerful program. And we've had a number of students, and certainly the numbers have increased over the last 3 or 4 years, that have found great success there. And again, I would encourage you to investigate more. And we typically will have them join us for a student presentation where they'll share various elements of their program and what opportunities are present there. But again, it is non-traditional. The extracurriculars are fairly limited at the moment. I think they have an ultimate Frisbee team that is the extent of their athletics. But again, it has worked for a lot of kids, and it's been a really great space for a lot of kids. So I definitely encourage you checking it out. And there's going to be information on that in the packet that I share with you. Am I missing any questions? I feel like I've gotten through the questions that are on the chat. So just as a follow-up, I'm going to send to you, and I've referenced this a few times, but I will be sending out to all of our families a follow-up to this evening. It will include the recording to this session. It will also include the slides from our presentation. And it's going to also include the high school information packet that you can read through at your leisure that has a number of links and lots of information about the schools and things that you might want to check out. And then the other thing is I'm going to be including a list of alumni who have agreed to share their contact information with you about the various schools in the area. And the one school that I don't have represented on there quite yet is Steiner, but I definitely plan to. And you may actually know their admissions director, who is Janine Huber. So I think you might know how to get a hold of her if you have any questions about Steiner. So definitely keep that list of resources and families close by, and again, be reaching out to them if you have questions. So I see one more question. Is the WTMC lottery open to all Washtenaw residents or only Ann Arbor residents? I believe it's open to all Washtenaw residents. So I think if you're in Washtenaw County, I think you're good. You're good there. So that's our evening for tonight. Again, a reminder that if you want to schedule and set up a one-on-one conversation between me and you, or I always like to include the child in those conversations as well. And again, it's something that they should be a part of this conversation and a part of this decision if you're open to that. And so I would welcome a chance to set that up with you. And all that takes is an email, and just let me know that you're interested in doing that, and we can set that up. So. It is 8:03. We've kept it to about an hour. And again, if there's if there aren't any other questions, I will plan on sharing this information with you tomorrow. And I really appreciate you all coming by and spending the evening here together. And please give my best to your kids. And again, I hope to see you all soon. So take care and have a great night.